There is a version of Tom Cruise the world believes in. The smile. The sprint. The man who leaps from buildings and hangs off planes and grins through it all like death itself is afraid to touch him. That version is real. But it is also a costume. Because beneath the most carefully constructed image in Hollywood history is a story so painful, so quietly devastating, that most people who know it choose not to talk about it. Today, we are talking about it. Thomas Cruise Maypother IV. Born May 3, 1962. Syracuse, New York. A boy with a learning disability, a violent father, and a mother who had nothing to give him but love, and a desperate need to survive. He would go on to become the last true movie star on planet Earth. Think about that for a moment. In an era where streaming algorithms replaced charisma, where franchises replaced human faces, where audiences stopped showing up for people, Tom Cruise is still pulling $100 million opening weekends. Still running. Still jumping. Still doing his own stunts at 62 years old. The world loves him for it. But here is what the world does not ask. Why does a 62-year-old man still need to prove himself this badly? Why does he never stop? Why does the most successful actor alive look, up close, like a man who is running from something? The answer to that question begins not on a movie set. It begins in a small apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, with a little boy who learned very early that the world was not safe. Thomas Maypother Sr. was, by every account, a cruel man. Not the dramatic kind of cruel that makes for clean stories. The quiet kind. The grinding kind. The kind that makes a child feel invisible. Tom Cruise has described his father as a bully and a coward. A man who hit. A man who humiliated. A man who moved the family over 15 times before Tom was 14 years old. 15 times. 14 years old. Think about what that does to a child. New school. New face. New kid who doesn't know anybody and has to figure out, fast, how to make people like him. Tom Cruise became extraordinary at it. He became so good at charm, at performance, at making people feel something when he walked into a room, that he turned survival into a superpower. But survival skills and peace of mind are not the same thing. And no amount of box office records can go back and give a little boy the father he deserved. That wound never healed. It just got buried under 50 films, 3 marriages, and one of the most obsessive work ethics the entertainment industry has ever witnessed. The running you see on screen? He was running long before the cameras turned on. Part 4. The Rise. By 1983, Tom Cruise was 21 years old and the world was already his. Risky business. That one scene. That one smile. Suddenly every studio in Hollywood wanted him. And he did not waste a single second. Top Gun. The Color of Money. Rain Man born on the 4th of July. One after another after another. Each one bigger. Each one bolder. He was nominated for an Academy Award at 27. Then again. Then again. He was not just a star. He was a phenomenon. And yet, even at the absolute peak of it all, the people closest to him would later say the same thing. Tom was always performing. Even off camera. Even at dinner. Even in private. The mask was always on. Because taking the mask off meant going back to that apartment in Louisville. Back to the boy who wasn't enough. Back to the father who made him feel like nothing. So he kept the mask on. And he kept running. But then something happened that even Tom Cruise could not outrun. In 1986, Tom Cruise was introduced to Scientology. He has called it the most important thing in his life. And whether you believe in the organization or not, whether you think it saved him or consumed him, what cannot be denied is this. It changed everything. For a man who had spent his entire childhood feeling powerless, Scientology offered something intoxicating. Control. Clarity. A framework for understanding why the world had hurt him. He rose quickly through its ranks. He became its most visible face. Its most powerful ambassador. And for a time, it seemed to give him exactly what his childhood had stolen. A sense of belonging. A father figure in its founder's legacy. A community that told him he was extraordinary. But communities that tell you that you are extraordinary often come with a price. And the price Tom Cruise paid privately, personally, in ways that are still unfolding, is one of the most haunting parts of his story. Because the same church that gave him belonging is the reason his daughter no longer speaks to him. 3 marriages. Each one ended. Each one left a mark. Mimi Rogers, 1987. She was the one who first introduced him to Scientology. They divorced after 3 years. She later gave interviews that raised eyebrows across Hollywood. Nicole Kidman, 1990. The golden couple. The dream pairing. A decade together, 2 adopted children, and then, a sudden quiet dissolution that shocked the world. Kidman has never fully explained what happened. But fragments have leaked over the years. Reports of surveillance. Of Cruz's handlers monitoring her phone calls. Of a marriage that existed, in part, as a performance for public consumption. When Cruz filed for divorce in 2001, Kidman reportedly said she was finally free. She was pregnant within months, by a new relationship she had kept completely secret. That is not the behavior of a woman who simply grew apart from someone. Katie Holmes, 2006. She was 26 years old. He was 43. The world watched their courtship with a mixture of fascination and unease. The couch jumping on Oprah. The sudden, overwhelming declarations of love. It felt like a movie. It ended like 1-2. In 2012, Holmes filed for divorce. Quietly. Strategically. She used a burner phone. She had attorneys in place before Cruz knew anything was happening. She moved to New York the same week. Her lawyers cited irreconcilable differences. But sources close to the situation pointed to one central issue above all others. Scientology. And what it was doing to their daughter. Suri Cruz was born April 18, 2006. She is now 18 years old. And by every available account, every photograph, every public sighting, every silence where a father's presence should be, she and Tom Cruise do not have a relationship. He was not seen at her high school graduation. He was not photographed at her college move-in. There are no sightings. No sources placing them in the same room. She has legally dropped his last name. She goes by Suri Noel now. Her mother's middle name. Let that sink in. The most famous man on earth. The man who runs across rooftops and climbs the Burj Khalifa and will not let a stunt double touch his scenes. Cannot, or will not, simply show up for his daughter. Former Scientology members who have spoken publicly about the organization describe a concept called disconnection. The practice of cutting off relationships with people deemed antagonistic to the church. Katie Holmes left the church when she left the marriage. Under that doctrine that could make her, and by extension, Suri, someone Tom Cruise is expected to distance himself from. He has never confirmed this. He has never addressed it directly. He just keeps running. But somewhere in New York, there is a young woman who grew up without her father. Who changed her name to erase his. Who is building a life in which he plays no part. That is not a publicity scandal. That is a tragedy. Tom Cruise has 2 other children. Isabella and Connor. Adopted during his marriage to Nicole Kidman. They remained with him after the divorce. They are both deeply embedded in Scientology. And Nicole Kidman, their mother, has said almost nothing publicly about her relationship with them. Almost nothing. Except once, in a rare interview, she let her guard down for just a moment. She said she prays for them. That single sentence. From a mother. About her living children. Spoke louder than any statement her publicist ever released. The church that gave Tom Cruise his identity has, one way or another, fractured every family he has ever had. His own childhood family, destroyed by a father who could not love him right. His marriages, ended in secrecy and legal maneuvering. His daughter, gone. His adopted children, separated from their mother in ways that may never be repaired. And through all of it, the Oscars, the billion-dollar franchises, the magazine covers. Tom Cruise kept smiling. Because that is what you do when the alternative is feeling it. At 62, Tom Cruise's body is a marvel. He trains for hours every day. He pilots his own planes and helicopters. He holds his breath underwater for over 6 minutes. He scales cliff faces without a net. The Mission Impossible franchise has become less a film series and more a public display of one man's refusal to age, to slow down, to become mortal. People call it dedication. They call it passion. But there is another word for what happens when a person cannot stop pushing their body to its absolute limit. Compulsion. When rest feels dangerous. When stillness is the enemy. When slowing down means the thoughts catch up. The people who knew him earliest, before Top Gun, before Scientology, before the mythology, describe a young man who was always in motion. Always performing. Always needing the room to love him. That boy never went away. He just got access to bigger rooms. Now the room is the entire world. And the world does love him. They pay $20 to watch him sprint and flip and survive impossible things. But when the movie ends and the theater empties and the screen goes dark, what does Tom Cruise go home to? Not a wife. Not a daughter who speaks to him. Not a family that sits around a table and tells him the truth about himself. Just the next mission. The next stunt. The next performance. The loneliness of that picture is staggering. There is a version of this story that is triumphant. Top Gun, Maverick. 2022. The movie that no studio wanted to make. That sat on a shelf for years. That everyone said was too old-fashioned, too sentimental, too much of a bet on a concept nobody believed in anymore. It made $1.49 billion. At 59 years old, Tom Cruise had delivered the highest-grossing film of his career. He had proven every doubt wrong. And standing on that stage, at the premieres, receiving the standing ovations, he looked like a man who had won. But winning a box office battle is not the same as winning the war that matters most. You can conquer a global audience and still go to sleep in an empty house. You can be the most photographed man on earth and still be invisible to your own child. You can be beloved by hundreds of millions of strangers and still not know how to be known by the people closest to you. That is the paradox at the heart of Tom Cruise's life. The bigger he becomes to the world, the smaller the circle of people who actually have him. There is a question nobody in Hollywood asks out loud. What does it cost to stay at the top for 40 years? Not financially. Not professionally. Personally. The answer, in Tom Cruise's case, appears to be almost everything. 3 marriages. A daughter who renamed herself. A faith that has drawn more controversy than comfort. A public persona so polished, so relentlessly maintained, that the human being inside it has become almost impossible to see. He has given the world an extraordinary gift. Decades of entertainment. Genuine craft. A commitment to practical filmmaking in an age of green screens and AI that is almost old-fashioned in its integrity. He cares about the movies. Genuinely, deeply cares. But caring about the movies has been, perhaps, the safest way to care about anything. Movies have scripts. They have structure. They have a defined ending. Real relationships do not. And for a man who grew up in chaos, in instability, in a home where safety was never guaranteed, control is everything. The tragedy of Tom Cruise is not that he failed. The tragedy is that he succeeded so completely, so totally, at becoming something invincible, that he may have made it impossible to be something more important. Human. Here is what strikes you, if you study his life long enough. Tom Cruise almost never speaks about his real life. He will talk about movies for hours. About stunts. About his passion for filmmaking. About the importance of showing up for audiences. But ask him about Suri. Ask him about Nicole. Ask him about the father who beat him. About the 15 schools. About the dyslexia that made him feel stupid and slow in a world that rewards effortless confidence. He deflects. Every time. With a smile so practiced it looks natural. He has had decades to perfect the pivot away from pain. And maybe that is what breaks your heart most of all. Not the divorces. Not the estranged daughter. Not the controversy around his faith. It is the smile. Because behind every perfect, practiced, camera-ready smile is the knowledge that something real is being hidden. And whatever Tom Cruise is hiding from the world, he has been hiding it for 62 years. There is a scene in Born on the 4th of July, one of Tom Cruise's greatest performances, where his character, a broken war veteran, finally stops performing strength. Finally collapses. Finally lets the audience see the devastation underneath. It is the most raw, exposed, truthful thing Tom Cruise has ever put on screen. And when you watch it knowing what you now know about his life, it does not look like acting. It looks like confession. Like for just a few hours on a movie set in 1989, Tom Cruise stopped running, stopped performing, and let something real come through. The world gave him an Oscar nomination for it. And then he put the mask back on. And he has never taken it off since. At 62, Tom Cruise is still running. Faster than men half his age. Further than anyone thought possible. Through a career that defies logic and a legacy that will outlast all of us. The world will remember him as an icon. As the last of a dying breed. As proof that sheer will and relentless commitment can carry a person further than talent alone. They will show the clip of him sprinting. They always show the clip of him sprinting. But here is what I want you to remember. Behind every person who cannot stop moving, there is usually a reason they are afraid to stand still. Behind every perfect smile is the face that existed before anyone taught it to perform. Behind the movie star, behind the legend, behind the billion-dollar franchise and the magazine covers and the Hollywood mythology, there is a boy from Louisville who just wanted someone to stay. Who wanted his father to be kind. His marriages to last. His daughter to call. That boy never became less real. He just became very, very good at making sure you never saw him. And maybe that is the most human thing about Tom Cruise. Not the stunts. Not the charisma. Not the extraordinary, unrepeatable career. The fact that underneath all of it, he is still just trying to be enough. And breaking, quietly, in ways the camera never catches. Because he is not sure he ever will be.